Hey everyone, this is Mike Wolf and welcome to the podcast. Today's interview is with Dr. Robert Graham, a friend of mine, someone who I got to know in Japan a little bit at the Smart Kitchen Summit in Japan. And the reason he was there and the reason I've connected with him since is he is one of the foremost, if not the foremost experts of this idea around food as medicine. He's a Harvard trained doctor and also he is a trained chef. He brings these two worlds together and he's passionate about it and he talks about it and he really kind of evangelizes this concept of food and its medicinal properties and how really it is so important, what we eat and how our ultimate health is. So this conversation actually happened a couple of months ago, but we're just now getting it published. Now we had Robert on Clubhouse. It was a really fun conversation and really educational. So I hope you enjoy this. As always, you can find more podcasts at The Spoon or just in your favorite podcast app as well. So that's it for now. Enjoy my conversation with Dr. Robert Graham. Let's get the ball rolling. I'm going to just start going here. We'll do a quick intros and then we'll have the conversation. I'm really excited to be here today with Dr. Robert Graham. Like I said, Robert and I have spent a little bit of time in person together, but Robert's really one of the leading thinkers around this idea of integrated health and food as medicine. And Robert, maybe you could introduce yourself more briefly or better than I can. Tell people a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's funny. I think we met in Japan, which I just love making friendships, across the world. We met one time here in New York. So just briefly, my name is Rob Graham. I go by Dr. Rob. I go by Chef. I go by Doc. I also go by son, husband. I consider myself son of an immigrant and son of a farmer. I've been a doc for about 20 years. I'm a board certified internist with a specialty in integrative and holistic medicine. I got my training at Harvard Medical School and was one of the very first fellows to explore this emerging field of complementary and integrative medicine back in 2003. During my time up in Boston, I also received a Master's of Public Health from the Harvard School of Public Health, where I completed 3 fellowships, one in general internal medicine, which is essentially a research fellowship, one in medical education, and one in integrative medicine. And my coursework was really involved researching the intersection between East and Western medicine, but in particularly how food can serve as medicine and understanding the science behind nutrition, which is a fascinating field because nutrition, it's interesting because leading opposing theories all work if short-term weight loss is the goal. But for me, it's really about a lifestyle. And I got interested in meditation, as well as botanical medicine and Chinese medicine, positive psychology. And a couple of years ago, now 4 years ago, I became a chef. I obtained my culinary degree from the Natural Gourmet Institute. And in 2016, started my current company called Fresh Medicine. We're called Fresh Med NYC. We have a medical practice and integrative health and wellness center here in New York City. I consult with various food companies in the space of healthy food, particularly food as medicine, and work with a company right now called Performance Kitchen and sit on a couple of boards and just really love to learn and talk about this intersection between food and health.
Great intro. And I'm glad you brought up the organization that you're working with in Performance Kitchen. I do want to get to them because I think this idea of creating essentially off-the-shelf products that are prescription, that a doctor can prescribe, that consumers can get at their local store is really interesting. But before we get to that, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the thought process and like your approach versus, I think, traditional medicine, because you put it very well on your website, right? You're not a pill for an ill. I think you have in quotes, but you're one that really looks and addresses the root cause of disease. And it might be kind of something that like people who think about food as medicine is just kind of a no-brainer to know this, but traditional medicine seems very reactive. And it's, oftentimes people are coming in, they're already sick. They've been eating poorly for years, if not decades. They may have heart disease already. But the idea of what you're doing, and I think the approach is just an idea where you're trying to get to the root cause and maybe be a little bit more proactive. So can you talk about the contrast between the two approaches?
Back to education. I'm often quoted saying that we do what we're taught. And the whole entire medical education model is based upon the study of diseases, the origins of diseases. It's called pathophysiology. And I think what we should be focusing on is more on the origins of health. But it's called saludogenesis, which is Latin for salud, which means health. And the whole medical model, both the delivery of it as well as the education model, is really based upon a disease management product. On top of that, it's also driven by a volume-based system, not a value-based system. And that's basically the two biggest problems I think we have with our healthcare system, is that, to your point, it's very reactive, never proactive, and never considers health promotion. In terms of federal dollars, 3% of the federal dollars go into prevention. And that's mostly in the realm of screenings, mammograms, colonoscopies, and stuff like that, vaccines and immunizations. But very little to almost no attention is spent on prevention when looking at all what we call the 5 pillars in your ingredients to health. FRESH is actually an acronym for those 5 ingredients: food, relaxation, exercise, sleep, and happiness. And in medical school and postgraduate training, meaning once you become a specialist, there is little to no, again, education on any of those. And so if we're not taught how to do it, how do we expect our doctors to actually prescribe it as medicine? So, it's very reactive, and it's focused on a volume-based theory, which means that we get paid for more, not better.
And that actually brings up a point. Like, you get paid for more, not better. There's strong economic disincentives in the existing medical system to basically prescribe pills, to be reactive. That's how doctors get paid. And I think the vast majority of doctors are basically getting it for reasons that are they want to make the world better in a sense. They want to keep people healthy, but they're working in a system that is economically built to disincentivize long-term health and wellness. So that's something that we need to it's kind of a tension there that we need to recognize, right?
Well, there's a whole movement that's been going on for about 10 years called value-based care, where you actually get paid a bundle price. Let's take an example for heart failure. So you get the hospital, and that's the other thing I really want to talk about, Mike, is that, we often think about healthcare dollars going to the pockets of docs, but it actually goes a lot of times to the pockets of the institution and our hospitals, and not to the actual doctors or nurses that are at the front lines, which is a big problem. I forgot the question you were asking me.
Just the economic system seems to be built against helping doctors achieve what I think they probably got in the business for, which is actually maybe making people healthier and having happier lives. The system is built to disincentivize.
Oh, 100%. And again, it's based on volume. And that's where I think that's really where the tension lies, is that the majority of my colleagues, go into it for very altruistic and compassionate reasons, really trying to help people. And for me, the most important thing is to reduce the burden of suffering of a fellow human being. And that's why most of us go into medical school. But then it's the pressures that we are put under, particularly under large healthcare systems, where the money comes from, again, more patients, more procedures in a very finite amount of time. So that's why you get these patients often saying that, when I ask my doctor about what else I can do for my health, it's usually what they call doorknob conversations, that they're already on the way out, but yet don't have the time to address these very important foundations of health and wellness with their physicians, partly because, again, they're not taught, but then they just don't have the time. And that's a real big problem. Another study showed that it takes about 8 to 10 seconds for a doctor to interrupt the patient during their storytelling or their history. And we learned in medical school that 90% of the diagnosis is made by the patient's history. So it's really, literally, it is a sick healthcare system that we're trying to navigate as altruistic physicians are trying to do their best. And that's why we're seeing burnout, of nurses and doctors. And a startling fact that I learned about a couple of years ago and really put the movement on me and trying to really solve this big problem of burnout in the medical field, 400 doctors kill themselves each year. And it's really been, this whole coronavirus has just put a spotlight on it.
Wow, that's a huge number. Startling, really. So I did want to ask you, you mentioned Performance Kitchen, which I think is a really interesting case study. For those folks who don't know about it, you can Google it quickly if you're at a computer. But, Dr. Robert Graham, you've been working with them. What's interesting to me is Performance Kitchen creates frozen foods that are available both with their own retail points of presence in the Seattle market, but also at various grocery stores, whether it's a Kroger's or a Safeway, I think, and at various stores they've had partnerships with. And what was interesting to me about them is it can be prescribed in a food as medicine approach. So meaning it can be reimbursed through insurance. And I think Anthem is an insurance company that actually reimburses for those prescriptions that people are prescribed the medicine there. And so, or the food as medicine. Talk about that. I think partly why I want to ask this question is I think another part that's disincentivizing this is the insurance side, right? And as we all know, insurance is a hugely problematic thing when it comes to healthcare. The idea that like Anthem is reimbursing people for using this food that is healthy for them that could be prescribed by you, for example, I think is really interesting and a cool idea, but it seems like this is one of the first. It's on a pretty small scale at this point.
Yeah, totally. And it is very progressive, I think. The father of medicine, Hippocrates, said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. That was over 2,500 years ago. And I think over the last 30 to 40, 50 years, as our food has become so much more processed and ultra processed, we've just gotten fatter and sicker. And so we've been hearing a lot about how healthy food can lead to better health outcomes. But how do you do that when nutrition is very personalized and everyone's healthy food is another one's poison? And so a couple of years ago, probably about 40 years ago, this notion of medically tailored meals started happening, particularly here in New York, with an awesome nonprofit called God's Love We Deliver. And the premise is that medically tailored meals are delivered to individuals living with chronic diseases through a referral from a medical professional or a healthcare plan. And these meals are tailored to a specific medical need based upon a diagnosis, and it is designed by a registered dietitian to meet the standards that are required to be called medically tailored. And again, this is about 35 years old, and it started with the AIDS pandemic here in New York. But as you know, with the AIDS pandemic, people have been living as long as the non-HIV population and succumbing to the same diseases that has afflicted just about everyone in our society. And so it's really the nonprofit world that really pushed this agenda for people who needed these meals delivered to their home, partly because they're homebound. But now what we're trying to do, and we're part of a larger movement, and there's a great website and coalition called the Food as Medicine Coalition. I think it's out of California, but Karen Pearl, the CEO of God's Love We Deliver, I believe she's the chairwoman. And so what's been fascinating about this whole movement is that it's we the people that have demanded this from our government. And so, you think about food as medicine as either prevention or treatment. And this is where I think it's really exciting, is that you can actually design alongside a dietitian meals that are medically tailored for a specific health condition, diabetes, heart disease, IBS. And for me, it was really awesome meeting up with Performance Kitchen, both as a chef, as a medical both as a doctor, as a medical advisor, but also becoming one of their chefs and helping design meals that are specific for their diagnosis. And slowly, some progressive insurance companies are offering them as a benefit. So therefore, you can literally go to your doctor and get a prescription for meals to be delivered to your house for your health condition. If I could just talk about two more things on that, is that I think what's really important is that, that's a barrier still. I would love today that patients can self-refer themselves to the insurance company based upon a diagnosis. So therefore, we don't have to rely on a healthcare worker to prescribe it, because then that goes back to the first question you asked me. Most doctors just don't know that this is an actual benefit, let alone available to patients, particularly the sickest of the sick.
One of the things that we talked about in our pre-conversation was this idea of scaling food as medicine, getting it away from being a bespoke prescription by a doctor that's individualized, and getting it to scale. And it feels like a model like Performance Kitchen is a critical ingredient towards that scale. You know, you're basically creating highly produced at a high level mass market products, potentially mass market products that could be distributed into retail. Would you agree with that? Is this one of the ways in which you get to greater scale?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I think what we're trying to do is just eliminate any sort of barriers for people to make the right decision. And I think, as a chef, we're often taught that frozen is best. I mean, I'm sorry, that fresh is best. And, how can frozen be healthy for you? And in fact, number one, I think our nutrition promise is strong. The reason why also I think we are the game changer in this field is that we not only, balance sodium and sugar, we also offer clean vegetables. We cook in only avocado oil, and we're very mindful of the protein that we use. And in fact, we are very, very mindful of the sourcing of our animal protein that we consume, that we put into our meals. There's no artificial colors, no flavors, no sweeteners, and we have the whole grain stamp of approval. And so it's really hard to find the right nutritious food for any condition, and it's based upon the Mediterranean. It's inspired by the Mediterranean diet, which again, research has shown that for any really condition, high blood pressure, diabetes, dementia, weight loss, the Mediterranean diet stands out as the number one diet. And every year, the U.S. News Report ranks it as number one diet. And so we're going, it's a multi-pronged approach, right? We're going to, like you said, retail. Someone in the Seattle area can pick it up in Seattle at one of our stores. You can also pick it up in large grocers, H-E-B, Kroger, Wegmans. We also do e-commerce and distribution. And the fourth part of it is engaging with health insurers and health systems to offer these by prescription. So, if you just want it, you can buy it at a store or at a grocer, or you can eventually try to get it as a covered benefit with your insurance plan. So by all means necessary.
You mentioned this idea of you wanted to get the doctor out of the way and letting consumers who maybe want to essentially self-prescribe themselves a food as medicine diet, something that's healthier. Maybe we can start moving towards that model. It's still one word largely if you want to get reimbursed by the insurance provider, the doctor has to be involved. But getting the advice and helping them move towards that is maybe something that technology can help with. I know that Kroger had an app called OptUp that basically allowed shoppers to track nutrition, and then it helped them suggest things that they could buy. Now, while that doesn't actually provide a reimbursable model yet, it certainly seems like it could be tied to one. And I know that Kroger is definitely looking at food as medicine as something that they want to embrace. So do you think technology could be something that could maybe help move towards this model where you can get the doctor out of the equation?
Yeah, it's interesting. The first point is crucial, though, right? Is that you need a doctor's prescription for it to be reimbursed by your health insurance. So that's a stumbling block, I think. And it is controversial. Here I am as a doc saying, get the doc out of the way to prescribe food as medicine. But the reality is that we don't. A step before that is really just the use of dietary registered dietitians in our clinic. And that is still about 16 to 20% of referrals by a doctor to a dietitian who can see a person under their health plan as a reimbursable service. So that's a sticking point. In terms of technology, listen, I think technology is great. I don't think we need more technology. I think we need better technology. And when we hear, and I speak at conferences about food and tech, oftentimes what happens is that we focus so much on the tech and we forget about the food part. We forget about the farmers, the essential workers, the cooks, everyone in the food space. And I think 9 out of $10 in the food tech space goes to technology, and only 10% goes to the food part of it all. So I think as we're starting to build more technology that drives more business, we also just can't forget about the social justice that has to be thought of when you're thinking about the food system.
Those are great points. I do want to just reset the room and let people know that we are talking with Dr. Robert Graham, who is a New York City-based doctor who has a practice called FreshMed, all about an integrative approach, a preventative approach. And you can probably do a lot better job than me, Dr. Graham, describing this. And I do want to say also, we want to invite some folks on stage. If you do have a question, I do think it'd be great for you to ask Dr. Graham. So if people want to start thinking about raising their hand, I will invite people on stage. And we have one right now coming on stage, Jack, our friend Jack Bobo. Hey, Jack, how you doing?
I am doing great. Thanks for bringing me up.
Yeah, do you have a question for Dr. Graham?
Yeah, I like everything that's been said. I mean, I think it's great, and we need to be trying to keep people healthy. But one thing that I wonder about is that, our healthcare system, of course, is really a sick care system. And so the idea of using the language of medicine when it's all about making sick people better than keeping healthy people healthy, it feels like we're adopting the language of a group that's not really achieving what we want to achieve, rather than finding a space to keep people healthy. And so I'm just curious if you find that there's any tension in using food as medicine because it buys into the sick, dealing with, making sick people healthy instead of keeping them healthy.
Yeah, it's a great point. Great question. Thanks for it. I agree. I agree that, we focus. Well, this is, again, goes back to the problem, is that the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, has what they call the triple aim. And the triple aim of healthcare is improve patient outcomes, improve patient satisfaction, and reduce cost. And that's why a lot of these initiatives are focusing on reducing cost. And talking about the burden of diseases are these chronic diseases that I think we're trying to get the sickest people less sick with the hopes of eventually leading them to a more healthy way. On the flip side of it, the analogy I give to your question is corporate wellness. A good percentage of our company focuses on corporate wellness. And Michael, I would like to talk about, our online school, which is the foundation of healthcare. But what we've seen in corporate wellness, as similar to in healthcare, that the people that need it the most use preventive services the least. And so that's really a change in culture of how people see their own healthcare being delivered. And that's where I think technology and, a plug for our online school called FreshMed U is really important, because it's really the ultimate self-care model. And a lot of times we're not taught how to be healthy, both in our schools and let alone our healthcare systems. And it really is designed to put you in control of your own care. So I hope that answers your question, Jack.
Yeah, really helpful. And just one follow-up, though. I mean, when I look around and talk to people, it seems like in many ways people do know what they should be doing, and they're not able to do it. Most people know they should be eating more fruits and vegetables, but, 90% of people don't get the recommended allowances. And so in addition to I guess it doesn't feel like a knowledge problem. We've never known more about health and nutrition in the history of the planet. We've never been more obese. And so, there's also that behavioral aspect to it, but I don't want to go on.
Oh, I just like to touch on that, though. I totally agree. I think COVID also has has put a spotlight on who dies from COVID. It's the people, the number one risk factor for dying for COVID beyond age, which is non-modifiable, is BMI. And I do agree that we're hearing a lot about it, but I think what we try to do, at least at Fresh Medicine, is show people the how. And so that's why I actually became a chef, by the way. I became a chef because I thought that nutrition is, like I said in my opening statement, is very confusing to people. But I think when you talk about food, it's a lot more clearer because ultimately food is what we eat. Nutrition isn't what we eat. And I've gained a lot of traction, particularly in medical education, in teaching doctors how to cook. And that led to an initiative teaching medical students how to cook and led to a field called culinary medicine, which I helped evolve into a field now in healthcare.
That's such a great point that you are a chef. I think that's so important. It's this idea of maybe also thinking about the chef side and having them cook and maybe offer themselves up as service providers to the medical community, right? Because oftentimes chefs aren't thinking about that. I think obviously there's been an embrace of plant-forward approaches and healthier diets, but the fact that you've really embraced this and straddled both worlds gives you a unique perspective, I think.
Well, I hope so. I'll tell you anecdotally. Like I said, I've been a doc for say 20 years, and I've been a chef for, let's say, 5 years. The amount of people, and I have a master's in public health, right? So I love taking care of people one-on-one, but to make societal changes is really the public health approach. And I'll tell you this, that I feel that I have changed more people's health by focusing on the big F in food as medicine and less on the M as a chef, working with other food companies like Performance Kitchen, but also large vendors and chefs throughout the country and really the world in helping design a healthier, more balanced meals. And maybe not as altruistic as, the food as medicine movement from a doctor's point of view, but from an economic point of view, they want to offer these healthier options at their restaurants because people are demanding it. And so that's why I love this. I love the fact that, people vote with their forks, fingers, and feet. And we shop that way. And if we don't go to a place because it doesn't offer a healthier option, then we're not going to go there again. So I feel like having a hat as a chef has allowed me the entry into the food service space that they're really hungry for change because maybe it's more economic than it is altruistic, but there is an altruistic part to it as well.
I do want to give others a chance to ask a question. There are some folks in the audience who've raised their hands, so I will welcome them on stage in just a bit. But Deneen, I hope I'm getting that right. You were next. Do you have a question for Dr. Graham?
So my question is, I've heard about this Fresh Med U, and I am really curious about it. And I'm wondering, is that a consumer facing education platform, or who's it for, and what's it good for? Who's your ideal customer, and what's it going to help us with?
Thanks, Deneen. So Fresh Med U was created by me and my wife Julie. As I said before, it's really a self-care model that puts you in control. It's oftentimes, as a chef, and as a doctor, my first entry into health and wellness is through food. But again, remember, FRESH is an acronym for the 5 ingredients, the Fresh 5. And I think what's really important when you think about holistic wellness is that you also have to think about how you relax, how you sleep, how you exercise, how you sleep, and how you find happiness. And the goal is really for anyone that's trying to find, to Jack's question, is how to get the tools to do it. We all know that we should do it, but I think what's really interesting about Fresh is that we literally spell it out for you. We track your goals one letter at a time, and we've been really fortunate that people have gravitated to it as a consumer, but also businesses And so the reason why we launched it was at a large grocery store chain here in New York City. A lot of their employees started succumbing to a lot of these chronic diseases and wanted a foundational wellness program that can be scalable. And by the wisdom of Julie, we put all of our content, which is about 700 pages, onto an online platform. And over 400 people have taken the course. And it's been really great. We have a bunch of them. We have a free one that everyone can sign up for. We also have a 4-week one. We're developing a 12-week one, and we have a 6-month course that really is a deep dive into the 5 ingredients of wellness. And so it's for individuals and it's for companies. And I just got to say you something. Deneen is a rock star when it comes to low back pain, which, we often...
Shameless plug.
We often hear of like diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, all that stuff. But in fact, low back pain is probably one of the top 5 diseases of burden in our society, both from a personal burden, but also healthcare costs. So I know you're doing great things in that space. So thanks for the question.
That's too sweet of you to throw some props my way. That wasn't necessary at all, but I thank you, and I am really excited for your all of your programming, and I think it's really amazing that you're bridging the gap between food and medicine and consumers and businesses, and just creating resources and programming and education to improve our broken systems. So, bravo! Thank you so much.
Thanks a million.
Thanks, Deneen. Roseanne, you're up next. Do you have a question?
I do. Thank you. Hello, Rob. Great to hear all of these amazing things that you're doing. I have a question and a little bit of background. I worked for a large HMO in the 90s, and I love what you're saying about having something that's scalable, because that's, the bottom line of money is a reality. But how, and I also love your points about public health. I mean, if this pandemic didn't teach us anything, it's certainly that we've got a broken public health system. How can you reach people who really need it, who, maybe are underinsured or can't afford these things? Because I do think your ideas about creating meals and using food as medicine, having a registered dietitian on your team that's creating these meal plans and recipes that work and treat disease, I think people need that, because everyone doesn't want to cook or like to cook or have those skills. And that's, I think, what stops them. Jack mentioned, people knowing what they should do and then doing it. So are you looking at any models that would be affordable for everyone, like, small costs for a home-cooked meal that is that therapeutic diet, essentially?
That's the $1 million question, and that's the challenge that we all have. One of the things that, I'll just be very honest. So when I first was speaking with Performance Kitchen, as I said before, the chef, we want the freshest ingredients, and really trying to understand how frozen, I think, when was the last time you bought something frozen? And that was really a big stumbling block for me to jump on initially. But then understanding the actual process of freezing our particular vegetables at the peak of freshness and ripeness.
Yeah, as a dietitian, we're fans of frozen and canned, because we know they do pack them at the peak of freshness. All the nutrients are there. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So that's one thing about scaling. And so, I agree. Not everybody wants to cook, but you can actually pop one of these meals. And we have a SKU, over 150 meals. And a lot of people say, why are there so many? But I think that's how we eat. We don't eat the 5 things every single day. So, scaling our portfolio, but at the same time, trying to keep our costs down, that's where I think frozen was really a brilliant kind of pivot. The other thing is that because of the frozen nature of it, you're actually able to keep it on the shelf longer. And that's one of the big problems with fresh foods too, when you're trying to go into communities that may not have the resources. And because of our scalability, we're able to lower our costs. And we often in Kroger, and I don't want to say the price point, but I know that you can get a meal, and there are coupons that you can get meals for like 2 for $8 or two meals for less than $10. And again, we also have to change how we eat, and what I'm really proud about is that everything contains, at least 8 grams of whole grains in it. And the fiber content comes from assorted vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, and whole grains. So it fills you up. And so our goal is really to feed people healthy food at a price point that's very affordable, but also from a chef point of view, very tasty. So as an economic model, you want people to buy it again, right? And so the only way you do that is you make it tasty. And that's where I think I put my chef hat on. And I can tell you, we joke around about you can trust your doctor, but you can also trust your chef if he's making your food.
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you. Thank you, Roseanne. Lisa, Chef Lisa, we have another chef on stage. Chef Lisa, do you have a question for Robert?
Thank you, Michael. Hi, Robert. We actually met years ago through Janera Sorrell at Soho House. And I saw you on I think we spoke on the subway one day. I, too, am a chef. And I'm originally a culinary archaeologist, and I specialized in food and wine production. And when I had my own health crisis, it really propelled me into moving from the world of wine and creating food and wine experiences to looking at food as medicine. And that's what inspired me to go to culinary school in order to be able to make really delicious food that was also very healthful and use the ancient energies and philosophies of food and to make it really healing I was dealing with anxiety and depression and ADD and autoimmune conditions. And it was, to your point about the big F, it was the number one factor in my healing and being able to get off of a whole wallet full of pills that I had been put on and inhalers. And that was really an entry point into just living more consciously, more mindfully, more spiritually, and then also getting the sleep, prioritizing self-care, all of that. It really completely transformed my health. And I'm so happy to hear that, that you're creating this initiative. I think it's really important. And, I wish more doctors would look to chefs who are trained properly in more food as medicine as a source and as a resource for their patients, because the healing that can go on, and I work a lot with people who are in the addictions field, and the transformation that I witness with people who have triggers and cravings, and when they're able to find ways through using food as something healing and not as a crutch necessarily to replace their substance of choice. It's really remarkable to see. So I'm not sure I have a question, but I just wanted to get my hand up and make that observation and to thank you for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, of course I remember you and your babies. And
yes.
I remember. Yeah, come by the office. Mi casa es tu casa.
Okay, I will do that.
That's great. Hopefully you guys can reconnect. That's awesome. And when things get back to normal, maybe we all can reconnect in New York. We do have another person on stage, Mike. But before we get to that, I have a question for you, Dr. Graham. One of the things that we've seen, we write about at The Spoon, is there's been a whole host of new startups that are working on basically using DNA testing, microbiome testing to help power personalized recommendations. And so some of them are integrating with 23andMe or Ancestry.com. Others are doing their own testing. but the idea of DNA-driven diets or customized food choices around your microbiome, or even nutritional supplements around your microbiome, is something that's getting traction in the technology, food tech world. What do you think of these types of solutions and platforms? Is this something that you think has a
great question?
Big future?
And it's a question I get asked a lot. So I think you are that. Yes. So I think there is a future in it. But right now, we just need people to start eating more fruits and vegetables. On my prescription when it comes to food is that people need to start eating more plants. In my practice, in fact, for the past 6 years, I've been using this kind of notion of personalized medicine. So most of my patients get a gut microbiome test. I use one that I've been using since my training up in Boston for about 17 years. It's not the latest, but it gives me such great information. I also do blood work. I do food sensitivities testing. I don't use, and I'm really interested in this whole DNA and understanding SNPs, which are our genetic makeup that allows us to eat the foods that truly heal us or feed us. But again, that's, I think at least I'm trying to do is go again the public health point of view, is that really trying to get to Jack's point, the sickest less sick. And then I think for a small percentage of patients and people out there that are really interested in, I'm going to call it biohacking their way to a healthier diet. I do that currently, but again, that's not, that's my maybe day-to-day job. But in terms of this whole movement is more about leaning people into healthier options and healthier foods.
Mike, I'll get your question just 1 second, but a follow-up for you, Robert. So obviously there's a lot of people talking about all the biomarker information we'll be getting from the new generation of wearables. And these are some of the ingredients in terms of from an information perspective that are going into this idea of personalized nutrition. Are you using that type of data? Are you looking to maybe in the future use information like glucose monitoring from like an Apple Watch as part of your plans and what you use on a daily basis? Yeah.
So in fact, on Tuesdays, I'm usually writing my book, and it's going to be called The Fresh Five, and it's coming out in January of 2022. And I have a whole section on how, going back to Lisa's point, is that I think self-care isn't selfish. And the other thing, given the right amount of information, you are your best doctor. You may come to see me once or twice or maybe 3 times a year for half hour, an hour visits, but, understanding how your body works and listening to your body and how it responds to, either food, relaxation, exercise, sleep, and happiness. I think that's where the future lies, is that less reliance on the quote unquote traditional medical visit where you quote unquote check in. Working with a lot of technology companies, people send you lab work right to your house, stool tests right back to your house. And similar to our conversation, Michael, about, unbundling the restaurant, I think we're going to start seeing the unbundling of the traditional medical practice where self-care is the best care that you can provide for yourself.
I also want to apologize to Mike for having him on stage and asking a bunch of questions for him. But Chef Mike, I think you're dialing in from the UK. You have a question for Robert?
Yeah, thank you for having me up. And yeah, I am dialing in from the UK. I've just got a quick question around how you deal with myths. I imagine you probably have a lot of clients who hear a lot of pretty far out there stories and social media led. How do you actually influence their mindset around evidence-based research, which you would necessarily practice? But how would you kind of steer people away from following bad advice or just misinformation?
Great question. And actually this morning I started teaching a class in Amsterdam to a group of F&B students. Some are chefs, some are front of the house, some are back of the house. And, one of the things that came up in that conversation was the power of influence. And I don't know, maybe because I'm old school, I think education matters, and where you get your resources and how you've studied the fields of both the culinary arts, medicine, and public health need to be validated in today's Insta fame, I call it. I do believe that there is a role, but I think we all have to kind of work on our strengths. And I don't know how to do it unless all you guys and tell all your friends to get me to, 1 million followers where people start listening to me. But short of that, I just think you have to do your own due diligence and find out where the information is coming from, where is the source coming from, and trace it back to that, because you're exactly right, Mike. Everyone has an opinion, and not all opinions are truths.
Yeah, thank you. The reason I ask that is because obviously I'm a chef, but I work in elite sport and I work with a lot of young athletes, and, I get asked loads of questions all the time, and it's just, sometimes you feel like you're banging your head on a brick wall because you just wonder where they're getting the sources of information from. I'm definitely not a nutritionist, but, performance nutrition is something where there's a huge crossover into performance catering. And I do work with, some of the best nutritionists in the UK. So I do have that source of information. And it's just very frustrating. I just wondered how you dealt with it, because I'm sure you probably have similar situations where you have individuals who, they're just being misled. People are trying to sell them products which aren't going to work. People are making claims of just where there's no evidence backing up any of the claims or science to go with it. So that's where the question comes from.
I share in that frustration, man. As a chef too, I work with a lot of chefs, and chefs like having me on stage or in the kitchen with them because they can just say, hey, just ask the doc, right? And that's the other thing is that we are licensed as a physician and as a dietitian. We're licensed to give health information, and many people who are giving it are not licensed, and I think the next wave is validity of veritas, of truth. There has to be some sort of filter in this space. And I don't have the answer to how that's done, but collaborating with people that you trust, I think, is the holy grail in this evolving age of disinformation.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been very helpful.
Thanks, Mike. Next up, we have our mutual friend, Akiko. Hey, Akiko. It's I don't know what time it is in Japan, but it must be some crazy hour.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Akiko.
We can hear you.
Hey,
we can hear you.
I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me in this room. We are FS, a mutual friend. It's really good. Robert, your talk was really inspiring to Japan. Japan is like almost 7 a.m. I'm just waking up myself. And I have kind of two questions. So we are working on creating a food innovation ecosystem in Japan, including these various industries. And Rob, your approach is a very holistic approach. That's what we really love. But what is really a good starting point to make this food as a medicine at the scale? We're talking to the food manufacturers or retailers or platform play or the other industries, but they all understand food as a medicine is really important. They want to make their business for the people well-being, but they know that they cannot do it just alone, so they need to collaborate with other industries. But where is a really good starting point? And also, in related to that, what kind of offering in terms of food as a medicine is really effective? What I mean by this is making a good packaged goods, or teaching the consumers or advocating this concept to the consumers, like media, or making appliances, or making it connected in the smart kitchen. I don't know, from Rob, your point of view, what kind of offering is now needed or good start?
I had the great fortune of speaking at your summit this past year, and I have to believe that it's a full stack approach. As my as my talk was, is that everyone has to be involved, from the medical education, retail, CPG, culinary part, the policy, the insurance, the agriculture, distribution, the consumer. Everyone needs a place. One thing I think when you're thinking about the industry, when it comes to retail, Michael, it's funny how we're just bringing this whole thing of unbundling everything. And I think COVID has really done that. It's unbundled healthcare, it's unbundled the restaurant industry. And I also think it's unbundled the retail, as well as it's unbundled the agriculture system. It's unbundled everything. And really, one thing that's really has spotlighted on is that the way we were doing things isn't the future. And I think companies just have to start believing that all it takes is the first step. Because I think a lot of people are dissatisfied with the status quo, but very few people actually, they have a vision, but very few people in companies take that first step. When it comes to retail, I'm working with a company right now in designing not necessarily medically tailored meals, but medically tailored boxes. And I'm going to give you an example. For example, retail. Retail is changed, and there's certain grocers like H-E-B in New York and in the States here that are focusing a whole section on health and wellness and food as medicine. And so that's the healthy section, as opposed to where the current grocery store, you shop the periphery and don't go in the middle except for maybe grains and beans. People need an easier grab and go. And one thing that I'm really excited about is the development of these called doc boxes. And the doc box is really a curated box which will give you a healthy Mexican meal, a healthy Italian meal that is curated by a chef, a registered dietitian, or me, that will streamline the entire shopping experience and makes the default. Because right now what we have is that the bad choices are too easy of a choice. And so we have to make the healthier choice the easiest defaulted choice. And so that's reconfiguring the grocery or retail space. Similar to the restaurants. The restaurants have to again, decouple. And the way we feed people in restaurants has changed forever. And so I think it's a multi-pronged approach, but I don't think it has to be a big investment, but you have to start somewhere. One other thing that I know that for example, PSK Supermarkets here in New York, what they've done is hired us to be their wellness vendor. So therefore, the whole idea is that you teach the teacher. And so if the employees are healthier, they're more likely to be healthier employees to the employer, but also share that information with the consumer. And so that's their approach. Their approach is trying to get the workplace healthier, so therefore they can be ambassadors of a change. So there's a lot of ways to do this. You just have to start.
That's great.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Akiko. Thanks, Akiko, for joining us. It's so early in the morning. Hopefully you've had your coffee or tea.
Thank you.
Carolyn, you're up next. You have a question for Dr.
I'm sorry, but to Akiko, just one last point. It has to be holistic. It has to be about well-being, because, a lot of times we talk about the physical in terms of nutrition, but social, psychological, environmental, that's all in part of that whole well-being. And that's why, Fresh is really, yes, it's about food. And, I show up in my chef whites, everybody thinks it's about food, but it's really about well-being and wellness, which again encompasses the environment you work in, the psychological states, the physical beyond just nutrition, and the social. I think it has to be holistic in nature.
Okay, great. Got it. Thank you very much.
Robert, this has been really fun. I feel like I've learned a lot. I've talked to you so many times over the past year, starting in Japan and intermittently during the year online. I feel like I learned something every time I talk to you. And so you did mention another partnership you have with the company in New York. And I think we talked about that when we were at Akiko's virtual event, I think in December. Very briefly, tell folks about that more. So you are working with a grocer And you, like you said, you're teaching the teacher?
Yeah. So I guess it just comes back to the educational premise of being a doctor. A doctor really, to translate to be, original translation is to serve as a teacher. And so the CEO of this grocery store chain called PSK Supermarkets, there's 13 stores here in New York area. As I said, it's not funny, but their dairy and meat guys succumbed, were quote unquote dropping. One had a ruptured aortic aneurysm, and the other one had heart disease, needed a stent. And so Dan literally called me while he was in the hospital room of the dairy guy. And he said, listen, I need him to come see you. But what I also need is I need to get my entire workforce healthier. I have 13 stores in and around New York. How do you get to all of them? And so pre-COVID, we used to do lunch and learns, and everybody would have to take off and go and come to the lunch and learn seminar where, I would talk about healthy nutrition. Julie would talk about meditation, happiness, exercise, and sleep. But then that was inefficient. And so Julie put everything online, and that's how FreshMedU really was born. And it was pre-COVID. So now, of course, she looks like a genius now, but you can do it anywhere, anytime. And it uses the idea of intrinsic motivation, is that health behaviors will come to people at different times. Oprah calls it the aha moment. And so if you have a platform online that all your employees can use whenever they feel motivated to use it, the engagement will increase. And what we've seen in the past year, Michael, and there's no exaggeration, we've had people lose 60 pounds, reverse their diabetes, lose 30 pounds, get off blood pressure medications, take care of their gut issues, have better coping strategies, even during COVID. And so it's really been amazing. And I think Dan, the CEO of Performance Kitchen, really is, a leader in this, how to bring wellness into a grocery store. But I think it's a part of a larger movement in corporate wellness.
We have Sarayu on stage. Sarayu, do you have a question for Dr. Graham?
No, I actually just wanted to say, I thought that you made such a beautiful point that I don't think that we acknowledge often enough, which is people come to things in their own time. And, I just wanted to quickly share, I grew up in a home which was perfect. My mother happens to be from India. She's a gourmet cook. So I would get food that was cooked with, if it was Indian food, with traditional spices, like all the Ayurvedic things, turmeric, ginger, mustard seeds, asafoetida. And I grew up on that stuff, as well as like pizza and pasta and whatever else she was making. And I summarily rejected it because it was from home. She would tell me, go do yoga. And I was like, no way. This was before this was popular. And it really took me many years to come back around. And really with the Ayurvedic stuff, it's only happened in the last year where I've been having some slight health issues, and Western medicine really wasn't being very helpful other than trying to treat the symptom. And I needed to treat this. It was a system issue. And I decided just out of desperation to go see an Ayurvedic doctor. And all the things she talked about were just such sort of intuitive, natural things like, hey, your hours are really crazy and you're drinking like a ton of stuff along when you're eating, and maybe your eating time should be separate, along with some herbs and some pranayama and stuff. And that has helped me in a way that nothing else has helped me, to the point where I'm now kind of trying to get her on Clubhouse, and because I think it would be great for her. But the point is that I was never open to listening to that message until I really needed it. Same thing with yoga, same thing with exercise. So I think that's something that we don't think about. I think we live in a society which, at least in the United States, can be quite fundamentalist on issues, right? When we gave up smoking, I mean, I remember being old enough to watch The Exorcist and seeing the doctor smoke in that, right? When he was talking to Reagan's mom, or when you could smoke on airplanes and trains. And in such a short period of time, the United States turned it around so quickly where you're really a pariah if you smoke. And so I think that it's kind of moving against that general inclination that we have to be like, hey, you get on the bandwagon or get out, but to allow people to come to things in their own time. So thank you very much for making that point.
Oh, thank you for that comment. I just want to, if I can, Michael, I think you'd enjoy my TEDx talk. It's called Back to Our Roots. And exactly, my mom is Latina, and we would have rice and bean sandwiches, and I would hate them. And then often people ask me, what's your favorite food? And I say rice and beans nowadays. So I teach an Ayurvedic school here in New York. So that's pretty cool. And, what I love about traditional medical systems, it starts with the premise of what are you eating? And so that's really was important for me to realize that that's the traditional medical approach. And now we consider it so abandoned, and the last point I want to make is that, minds are like parachutes. They only work when they're open. And that's something always to remember, that it will eventually come to you if you want it to, but you can't force it.
And, I'll add just one more thing, if I might. I went to my GP, my new GP, to let her know sort of what was going on. And, I said, look, I'm using this cream and I'm doing this, and none of that worked. And I said, but I started an Ayurvedic course and it's working. And I expected this response. She said, well, there's no scientific evidence. And here's all I have to say about that. The Indians and Chinese as societies aren't stupid. And if they've been practicing something for over 5,000 years, okay, I'm sorry if it's not written down in a book. There's probably something behind it. So, I just wanted to say that. I listened to her out of respect, but, I'm continuing with my Ayurvedic course.
It's the integration that needs to happen.
Yes, 1,000%.
Thank you for that, Sarayu. Hiroshi, Dr. Mishimo, welcome on stage. You have a question?
Not as much a question, but I just wanted to extrapolate on what Sarayu is saying. Really, I am Western trained in medicine and science. I'm a molecular biologist. But I have to say that culturally, being Eastern, I had sometimes during schooling always rolled my eyes thinking, oh my gosh, this is hogwash. Even when having a pharmacist as a mother who is trained, of course, in both Western and Eastern medicines, as is done in Japan, or my father who has actually used acupuncture during head and neck surgery on patients. But I think what's important, though, in my own mission is, I think, very mechanistically, and I am hoping that with advances, it will be able to put Eastern thoughts and Eastern medicines in the framework of Western mechanisms so that we can start understanding and convincing and having people adopt such things. And I don't like to use the word alternative medicine, but I consider it very complementary medicine. And I hope that this will become more and more part of our education in the West. I'm turning the mic over.
I totally agree. And when I started this chat with Michael today, he asked me to give a quick bio. So in 2003, I was, like I said before, I was one of the very first fellows in this emerging field of integrative complementary medicine. And the idea back then was to develop a scientific basis, working with the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to develop a strategy. And we did. We developed a 5-year strategy, and then we went on to a 10-year strategy. And every 5 years is a new strategy. The big problem, Hiroshi, Doc, is that the way research is typically done by conventional Western medicine, it's very much driven by the pharmaceutical model, the double-blind RCT, randomized placebo-controlled trial, and I think the true beauty of the integrative or the complementary traditional healing systems is that it is truly personalized, and that purple pill won't work for everyone with acid reflux, and it has to be individualized. The problem with that, studying that model where it's really based upon a lot of n's of ones, not a large sample size, that's where we get stuck. And that's part of the reason why I left clinical research. I was a clinical researcher at Harvard for 5 years. I thought I hit, the Mecca, but realized that the models of inquiry in the conventional research models is very hard to do in a holistic, integrative, or complementary modality.
I really appreciate you spending time with us, Dr. Graham. And I think we could probably do another hour. So I want to open up an invitation to welcome you back. And I'll let everyone know when you do come back, because I think you could just go on for hours and answer our questions, because this has just been such a learning experience. So, but I do want to bring the room to a close. I want to ask everyone to give Robert a thank you, either by muting your mics, unmuting, and just thank you, Robert, so much for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
Oh, so lovely.
Thanks, Robert.
This afternoon with you guys. Thank you so much.